Right, the State of the Nation discussion starts now. We talk about matters, politics and everything in between there. We'll tackle three main topics with the court dealing Ruto a blow on new taxes and what the impact that will have. We'll also talk about the failed talks between Azimio and Kenya Kwanza. There's a push and pull, who is pulled out, who is in, who is not in, and also the Sabasaba protests that are coming up tomorrow. That is a conversation we're having. At Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Daybreak. Let's start off by introducing my guest from my farthest right. Willis Otieno is here, advocate of the High Court and Deputy Party Leader Safina Panti. Thank you so much for making time. Followed by Honorable Jared Okello, Member of Parliament for Nyando. Asante sana for making time. Honorable Dr. Boni Halwale, Senator for Kakamega, is here with us. Asante sana for making time. And Adrian Kamodo, advocate of the High Court. Thank you very much for making time. Gentlemen, let's start off with this conversation. It's already on the front page of the Daily Nation. Court dealing Ruto blow on new taxes. And Willis, I'll start with you on this because it's sub judice to talk about this matter too much because it's already in court, but we can talk about the impact per se. What does this portend? Is it true that since it's been suspended, government cannot collect more than 5.7 billion shillings, or is it that the 2022 Finance Act continues?
You know, the first thing is that the Finance Act is an amending legislation. It amends existing revenue laws that are in place. So as it is, government can still collect based on those laws because the Finance Act did not repeal the provisions of the previous laws which had been amended by the last year's Finance Act. So what government needs to do is that off the table, respect the court order as it was made. Don't make collections based on the amendments which have been raised by the Finance Act. Then wait until the court makes a final determination on the question of legality of the Finance Act, its constitutionality. If the court does not does not uphold this current Finance Act, then government can always go back to the drawing board and propose a new Finance Act. Nothing stops them because the doctrine of necessity will actually apply in the sense that this act having been quashed by a court, then they can propose a new bill that will seek to achieve those revenue-raising measures that they sought to achieve under the present Finance Act.
Yeah, but what happens to EPRA, for example? It's also been sued that they adjusted the prices of fuel.
Of course,
bought fuel at this particular.
That will be a class. That will be a case for a class action by consumers who've been charged a sum without a legal framework.
So that's a whole new case.
That's a whole new case because then you can maintain an action that the raising of the fuel of the petrol VAT by 16% when there was no legal framework for it. Then I can maintain an action against EPRA, and not only just EPRA but even the various petrol station companies that are the ones who are actually collecting this money. So you can do a case against EPRA, you can do a case against the petrol companies, and then ask them to pay back. So that will be a class action, in my view, and there's a cause for it.
Lawyers don't seem to agree on this, so Kamoda, I'd like to hear your views on that. Is that your reading as well? Are we precipitating a crisis, or everything stands as is?
Yes, indeed. We are precipitating one, because the Finance Act sets the basis for the correction of revenue. And as you observe readily, that's why you see issues have arisen as to whether now people can continue paying tax in the absence of an appropriate legal regime to govern the correction of taxes. And you find there is also the issue about compliance with the court orders, in the sense that if the act has been suspended and precisely the act makes provision of what amount of tax should be levied, then on what basis shall you levy taxes? So basically, there is a state of paralysis as a result of the imposition of the embargo on the Finance Act, because it's the platform for generation of taxes in terms of guidance, the quantum, amount, the rates. Otherwise, without the backing of the law, what then would you be relying on to levy taxes? So it becomes a very absurd situation for government because in the end, you have already made a provision for various items when you are budgeting that I'll be able to collect the revenue from, let's say, fuel or from this other item. But you're not doing it because the law has been suspended and you want to comply with the court order. So you are not ideally correcting what you ought to be correcting. Time is running out. When you are making the budget, you made it for a full year cycle. But then, incidentally, by the time maybe the decision is made, you have run out of a month or 2 months. So how do you get back to the person who was supposed to pay tax for a previous month and tell them, now, we need you to pay tax for the fuel you consumed a month or 2 ago? It becomes an impossibility. So
in your reading, the government cannot use the Finance Act 2022 in this interim?
But the government, the same government, is being cited for contempt.
No, so, I thought you were asking about the last years.
Yeah.
Can
they use the last year?
Yes.
The trouble there is because the government, whatever the government does, it must do it in strict compliance with the prevailing legal configuration.
Okay.
If you are going to correct taxes, and then at the same time you are being vexed with proceedings for contempt, do you continue? Do you want to go to jail? Because you are trying to correct taxes so that you serve the citizen. Yeah. But the sword of contempt is over your head. Do you proceed?
But the one in contention is not the 2022 Act, it's the 2023 Act.
But it was supposed to take effect on 1st of July. Yeah. So it became effective on July 1st.
Okay.
There are those provisions that become effective immediately the year begins.
Okay.
So what do you do with those ones?
All right. Okay, you wanted to jump in on
Yeah, I really wanted
the lawyers don't agree on that particular one.
Because I think you guys were discussing two separate issues here.
Okay.
You were asking a very direct question. In the absence of a law that creates a new taxation regime, such as the Finance Act 2023, what happens? When the court sat down and came up with a conservatory order that stayed the execution of Finance Act 2023, they did make a ruling that the status quo remains. And that simply means that Kenya has always had, every year, a taxation law. We have the Finance Act 2022, 2021, all the way down. So in the absence of this, which has been set aside temporarily, the Act of 2022 applies. Ask yourself why there is still continued taxation. Just because there is an existing law, there is no lacuna in law that creates issues of taxation. But suffice to say that the law simply provides for projections. Okay? So we are not in a catch-22 situation that without implementing this, the country will come to a halt. There are many cases where the projections in terms of collection by Kenya Revenue Authority goes below par. Then what happens? Parliament retreats to come up with a supplementary budget that aligns itself with the reality on the ground. Ruto only came up with projections. He dreams that by the end of this year, we are going to have an additional collection of 211 billion shillings, which he thinks is lying in the pockets of Kenyans, and Kenyans have refused to give it to the government. So he's coming up with very punitive laws, making it mandatory that whatever it is, you must pay those taxes. Of course, that is not going to happen because it's a good, he's ambitious, and ambitions are very good. But again, you have the reality on the ground. When you make lives unbearable by coming up with these punitive taxation regimes, what happens is people cut back on their expenditure. And when people cut back, it inevitably brings down issues of tax collections. So the 211 billion is a very, very good ambition, but which is not going to be achieved. Under economies of scale, you want to buy bulk, and as a result, get little out of that big bulk purchases and make your profits. Yeah. But Ruto is doing the reverse. He's cutting back on economies of scale by saying, just buy little, but tax it so heavily so that it equalizes the economies of scale strata. That is not going to work. it is important to note that when this Finance Act was coming into place, the most discussed Finance Act ever in the country, in this country, was Finance Act 2023. And you know why? Because it is bad on its face. 1,400 petitions came from Kenyans to dismiss certain elements or clauses within the Finance Act, all which were ignored. 93% of Kenyans on a survey said this is a taxation regime that we do not align ourselves to. That was all ignored. Members of parliament, you know, because that is where they claim to have the numbers, and we saw it. 184 members of parliament who've never gone home since the enactment of Finance Act 2023. And for very obvious reasons, my brother here, Honorable Aluale, I'm quoting him because he's here to defend himself. During the course of that debate, was in some, I think what was a funeral or something, he knows better. But because he talked about the Finance Act positively, he had to face the wrath of the electorate. So that tells you how bad this law is to the citizenry. And we only hope that the courts of law will take judicial notice of all the happenings that have been around this Finance Act.
All right.
But Parliament, as I was telling you, became compromised by rejecting the wishes of 93% of Kenyans and went with only 7% and voted for this Finance Act. We did tell them on the floor of the House that you can do it, but there is a court of law that has the capacity to apply brakes where necessary. And indeed they have.
All right, Dr. Aluale, first I'll give you a right of response to the allegations being made by...
Not an allegation,
that you are the wrath of the people. Is it true that the people...
It was so bad, brother, and I sympathized with you.
You know, I do not understand why our two lawyers are not agreeing. I also don't understand why on this very fairly straightforward issue, it should divide the legal minds of the country. The only organ of the Constitution that has the power to make decisions that assume the force of law is Parliament. And therefore, the courts can say what they said, but they can never repeal the Finance Act 2022-2023. So, what the media is doing here, they're just continuing with the usual hype. There is no crisis in the country. Taxes are being collected because whatever the court says cannot be assumed to have repealed the existing act. So life goes on. The only end result is that at the end of the financial year, the financing gap will widen somewhat for the equivalent of what would have been met in these 10 days when the new act has been suspended. And every government must address financing gap. So at the right time, when we find that the gap which was supposed to be 700 has widened a little bit, we'll do that which must be done.
We're bringing a supplementary.
So, and I know you're going to attack me on this one, because the media has already taken a position.
You're preempted.
Because the media has already taken a position on the Finance Act. That's why you would like to hype issues that make Kenyans anxious, as if life is coming to an end. It's not. To end my contribution, let me applaud my brother Okello for being a keen follower of my politics.
You are my mentor.
It is true.
But I left you.
Yeah, I remember how I came to Nyando and campaigned for you.
Not Nyando, my home. You were in my home.
And ate very nice, was it called Ngege?
Yes.
In the house.
Yes.
The days when your party didn't want you.
Yes.
But we accommodated you.
Yes.
My brother, let me tell you, the mark of leadership is taking a step forward to break fresh ground. That is the mark of leadership. If you cannot do that, then you should not lay claim to leadership.
But should you break ground even when the people are against you?
Yes, because they don't know. And it is the thinkers who said, I'm not the one who said it, who said that when you are right, you are right even when you are right in the majority of one. So the Finance Act was good, and I stepped forward, and this is not the first time, Okello, that I'm stepping forward ahead of my community to speak to something I did when BBI was being pushed down the throats of Kenyans. I stepped out when all the so-called Luhya kingpins were in BBI and Handshake. We did. We stepped, and people made a lot of noise, but that did not stop the BBI from being what it became to pass. So I want to encourage you, because you are a young politician, my brother, going forward, you can only be defined as a leader for the new things that you're going to speak to, the new things that you're going to do. Otherwise, this comfort zone of you hiding
behind 93%
and hanging on the coattails
behind 93%
of Baba and telling people that you are a leader in your community, you are lying to yourself. In fact, this is the reason why a tired grandfather like what Baba is still there, relevant in politics in his region, because these able young professionals have refused to tell him that we can do what you're doing and in fact do it slightly better. So they hide behind him, I get their seats, and that's all. So the politics of the region have not moved. So, but as because we are aggressive, we say, no, I'm sorry, if you are older than me, if you are ahead of me and you are not right, I'll pursue what I think is right.
But Dr. Lwale, how can you
sorry, Trevor.
Half of the people
Trevor, this should not be allowed to pass.
I'll give you a chance to respond.
No, I mean, we are going to forget this.
You won't forget.
You asked a very fundamental question around the Finance Act. He has segued into talking about Baba. And Baba is not engraved in the Finance Act. This man here, my friend Honorable Bonia Lwale, and he's a very good friend of mine, he probates and reprobates, meaning he says some very good things and all of a sudden makes a detour to something. He has said that it is the mandate of Parliament to make up laws. And what he is trying to preempt is that what the judiciary is sitting to prosecute may be in vain. That is what he's saying. But I want to remind him for free, and he has talked about the BBI. BBI was passed in Parliament. It was passed by majority of the Kenyan people. We collected signatures, more than the threshold. And when this matter came to courts of law, it was nullified right from High Court all the way to the Supreme Court. So we cannot say that whatever Parliament passes is a supreme law that cannot be tinkered with. You remember the security laws 2016 that generated a lot of furor in the House. When this matter went to courts of law, it was overturned all the way to the Supreme Court. So we cannot say that whatever Parliament has done, because they have the legal mandate to make laws, that is final. No. This must face the wrath of the judiciary. And I want to ask the judiciary. They have been threatened by this coalition called Kenya Kwanza. The same way the media is being threatened. Even when you guys bring very bright light to the dark corners of this regime, they want to fight you, because they have compromised Parliament, so that is in the custody of the executive. The only remaining institutions that are poking holes on this government are only two. That is the judiciary and the media. Parliament is gone, and it is gone forever. The civil society,
so
I'm part of it. I'm part of it. We could only marshal 88 to the very maximum, 88. Against 162 members of Azimio coalition.
So you're saying half of you are compromised?
Half are gone. So that is what I'm saying. If Parliament cannot carry out its oversight, you must have an alternative, which is the media and the judiciary. Now, because they have tried to compromise the media, but the media has stood their grounds because they are professional, they're now fighting the media. He has just, given a swipe at what you have said here, that the media is the one trying to bring all these issues. Media only reports facts to the people. And if in areas where the media has misreported, they have a recourse. There's the Media Guild, they have professional bodies, and there's the court of law.
Okay.
So this idea of trying to fight media so that media can also dance to their tune and now remain with the judiciary and also try to compromise the judiciary, that is autocracy. And that is how autocrats work.
Yeah.
And we will not allow.
All right. Will is from...
Can I just bring to the attention of everyone?
Yes.
You know, the challenges to the finance bills, this is not the first time.
Okay.
In petition number 532 of 2013, that is Robert Gakuru and others was the governor of Kiambu County. Residents of Kiambu went to court to challenge their finance bill, the equivalent of the national finance bill.
Yeah.
And the court nullified that finance bill. It didn't mean that Kiambu County failed to collect taxes after that. And they can continue because those revenue-raising measures that were there before, the legislation that set them up are still continuing. So even now, not all revenue-raising laws in Kenya were amended by the Finance Act. They are still in force. A Finance Act, even if you look at it, it is not a standalone act. It's an act that amends other revenue-raising legislation. So the conservative orders by the court does not affect, even if the court nullified this Finance Act, there is no crisis. We still revert back to 2022 Act and what is amended, and that is what we'll use to raise revenue for the country. But more importantly, there's one thing that Senator Khalwale has said, which I must respond to. The issue that sometimes you break away from even when you are the minority, that you are leading the people to a point.
Even when they refuse.
Even if they refuse. Core to our Constitution, Article 10 and Article 118, is what we call public participation. And in the Kiambu Finance Bill case, the court discusses what does it mean when we say public participation. It must not only be quantitative, but it must be qualitative. Quantitative in terms of numbers, but qualitative in terms of the aspect. How do you take into account what the people have said? Such that if the people, 90% as per the opinion polls of Kenyans, have said no to the finance bill, you cannot say that these 90% are so wrong. Maybe you've just not socialized them enough into these new revenue-raising measures that you want to undertake to their benefit. So don't force your will on them. Otherwise, you are going to reduce our component of public participation to be nothing, because then it means whatever the leader says is what ultimately carries the day. That was the architecture of our laws before 2010. But the new Constitution, 2010, moves us to a point where whatever you are doing, you must carry the people along with you. So probably Kenya Kwanza and the administration have not been able to carry along the people on why this revenue-raising measure. So go back and talk to the people, convince them, and carry them along with you before you now impose your will on them through a legal fiat. That is what they are doing. And the Constitution is telling them, no, wait a minute. In Kiambu 2013, they did the same thing. They decided to pass a finance bill saying even raising rates of 100% of what was being charged previously. The court told them no. You must go back to your people, sit down with them, explain to them these revenue-raising measures they are coming up with, hear their views before you can now impose a tax burden on them. And finally, Kenyans are not denying or refusing the finance bill just because they don't want to pay tax. Kenyans pay tax every day. But you've reached a point where you are trying to tax Kenyans beyond what they can afford. What Kenya Kwanza is trying to do, if you look at the revenue estimates on domestic, on tax, they are trying to raise 1 trillion more in 1 year than they raised in the previous year. They are raising the revenue target by more than 1 trillion. It took Kibaki 10 years to move our revenue target, revenue-raising measures from 290 billion when Moi left to almost 900 billion by the time Kibaki was leaving. It took Uhuru 10 years to raise it from 900 billion to 1.8 trillion the time he was leaving. So what actuaries will tell us is that to get the 1 trillion target, it takes around 10 years. Because it's the same cow, as I always say. You cannot say, and Senator Boni is a bullfighter, you cannot say that a cow that that last year you milked, or yesterday you milked and raised a liter of milk, that now tomorrow you are going around in the market telling people, I'm now going to supply 10 liters of milk from the same cow. It's the same feeds, it's the same water that you feed this cow is the same environment, same climate.
Yeah.
What is this miracle that is going to make the cow now produce 10 liters of milk today than it did yesterday?
Okay.
So also with our taxation, it's the same economy, it's the same taxpayer, it's the same, and in fact, worst of it is that even our economic situation is even dwindling.
Yeah.
Because you see a very hostile government to certain major players who pay large taxpayers. Look, for example, at what they're doing in the edible oil subsector. You technically taking on a sector that pays between 40 billion to 50 billion per year on taxes. You are now trying to push them out of the market by giving an opportunity for people to import refined edible oil, palm oil, that is finished product. So that cow, that sector that was giving you 50 billion per year, because of these other measures we are coming up with, they will not be able to give you your 40 billion per year. They are going to cut on jobs. They are going to reduce on how much they are paying. So that's what I'm saying. In regard to the finance bill, Kenya Kwanza got it fundamentally wrong. And I'll come back later to explain to you. Why are they trying to raise 1 trillion shillings in 1 year than the previous administrations?
Kamodo, why are you seeing a crisis before I take a break from all these things? Why are you seeing a crisis? Because the two of you legal minds don't seem to agree on this.
Yes, of course, Willis has some very good ideas, but he's getting it wrong again on numbers and on the logic behind the whole concept of taxation. The Finance Act, the reason why it is an annual undertaking is because after every year, there will be developments within the economic setup. There are things that will change. There are observations that will be drawn from the previous financial cycle, and that's why there will be need for adjustments. Parliament has gone ahead and enacted the Act of 2023, which has sections which are supposed to take effect on 1st July and others 1st September. So when you have some of those provisions being rendered inoperative, then it means at the end of the year, cumulatively, you will have significant shortfalls, which you will not be able to recover. And this is the money that runs and funds the operations of government. The government, as the year begins, it has zero funds. So it has to begin raising, but it has trillions of obligations in terms of paying salaries, paying for development expenditure, and so on. So the development expenditure has not been suspended. You have not been told that now the development should not go on because the Finance Act has been suspended. So whatever was budgeted for and the expectations that were and promises that were given to the citizens will still remain in force. So the challenge that will come to the government, I think this is something that is being done deliberately to to set up the government, is in a few months' time, when the government is not able to deliver on its promises, simply because the funds it could have generated are not there, the next narrative will be, this is a government of liars, a government of falsehoods.
They failed on them.
But that will be the reality. There will be no money, because no money is being collected.
One of the many lies.
But also, not one of the many lies. And I see, Willis, and in fact, I'll bring you back in on this, and I see what Kamodo is saying. So let's make it practical and simpler for Kenyans. In 2022, I was supposed to collect 2 shillings from Willis. But it is now agreed that in 2023, beginning 1st of July, I'm supposed to collect 3 shillings, not the 2 shillings. But this 3 shillings of mine now has been stopped for now. So do I continue collecting the 2 shillings and yet I'd already budgeted for collecting the 3 shillings from Willis until this court case is decided? And whether it's decided in my favor, do I now revert to the 3 shillings? And what happens to the period where I just collected 2 shillings based on the previous?
That is the beauty of a constitution. What the judge applying her mind to the issues that was before, she felt that it raises serious constitutional questions. These petitioners have gone to court And they have said, we have a problem with this because our fundamental rights are being violated, the Constitution is being violated. And the judge has applied her mind to the facts and the law. And she's found that there is prima facie case to issue orders to stop it. Now, that is what democracy is about. So that what Kenya Kwanza will do, assuming they were to succeed in court, is not to say that we've lost money. There was an important national exercise that was taking place, known as trying to find out if executive action and legislative action by our bodies are actually complying with our constitution. Because otherwise, a national executive will always come up with punitive measures and tell you, you cannot stop it because we will lose money or we lose time. But you have the court which needs to pause and consider the constitutionality and legality of what you are doing, then it gives you the clean bill of health. But more importantly, as I said, some of the issues that are being discussed in the court and was discussed in the Kiambu Finance Bill of 2013 is the question of the quantity and the quality of public participation.
Yeah.
You can't ignore it. So it's like the country has taken a pause. And as Mheshimiwa Jared says, they have another opportunity in the supplementary budgets when they will come in. If there are any other, they need to do supplementary budgets to consider reallocations on any other funds for projects that may not have been undertaken.
All right, I have to take
because
a break
of
now,
the challenges in finance.
Yes, but I see Alwali wants to jump in really quick.
No, I think it's also good for the viewer to hear the other side of the point that Willis is really hammering, namely public participation. The intention of public participation was not to give the public an opportunity to make law. The intention was to give it an opportunity to be part of lawmaking through making suggestions on amendments and possible improvements. For the last 10 years, I have been sitting in committees receiving views from the public on the various laws that we have enacted in this country. It doesn't mean that they come and rewrite the law. They make proposals. Then you, as a committee, you sit down, listen to them, sieve through the things that make the law better, and many of them normally make very good contributions. Then these things inform you and you make law. So to leave the impression that public participation means they say, no, what you have proposed is not going to apply, it is what we are proposing, it simply means you are shifting lawmaking from Parliament to members of the public. And in the case of my brother Okello, you have a history of getting it wrong. So how do we trust that this time your position on finance, you are going to get it right? When you talk about...
You say Okello as an institution or an individual?
Okello and the Okello-like. How do we trust that having got it wrong on BBI, you're going to get it right on the Finance Act?
Okay. I have to take a break, gentlemen. When we come back, we talk about the failed talks and the protests, and I'll give you a chance to respond to this. The next topic will actually capture almost everything, because the failed talks is also leading to the protests that we're going to see on Sabasaba. We'll talk about all that in just a bit. Keep your views coming at Trevor Mbija to Citizen TV Kenya. The hashtag Daybreak. I see some of them. We'll read some of them right after this break.